So UFC 194, of course, one of the biggest events of 2015. The co-main was Chris Weidman. Main event, of course, Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo, 13 seconds. Wow, we've talked about it. Unbelievable. Now, on this particular show, we've talked to a lot of people surrounding Conor McGregor who are a part of Team McGregor. We've talked to, of course, on many occasions, John Kavanagh, his head coach. We very recently spoke to Ido Portal, his movement coach. We also spoke to Mr. McGregor, Tony McGregor, Conor's father, after the win at UFC 189. We have not talked to, up until now, one of the most important people in Team McGregor, one of the guys who has been there with him essentially from the get-go, and also one of the most important figures in the history of Irish MMA, one of the men who is largely responsible for this Irish MMA explosion that we've seen all around the world as far as the UFC is concerned in particular. This is a guy who is a pioneer in many people's eyes, and it was so interesting to see the reaction to the simple mention that he was going to be on this show today. You know, a lot of people weren't writing back to me about Conor or Uriah or Don. They were all writing about how excited they were that Owen Roddy was going to be on this show. If you don't know the name, you should. You've certainly seen him. He is Conor McGregor's striking coach. He is a coach over at SBG, also at his own club, Primal MMA, and as I mentioned, a pioneer of Irish MMA, and he joins us right now on the phone. Owen, how are you?
I'm good, Ariel. Come here. Thanks for the kind words. I'm happy to be on the show.
It is a pleasure, my friend. Thank you very much for the time. I've wanted to have you on for quite some time, and I apologize it took us so long. So there's a lot to get to with you, but I have to ask the obvious question first because everyone's buzzing, and I don't want to put you on the spot here. But from your perspective, is there anything that you can tell us regarding Conor's next fight? We all presume it's going to be Rafael dos Anjos on March 5th, yet here we are less than 8 weeks out, and there's no announcement. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, well, all I know just from listening to Conor is that he is fighting March 5th. The opponent is up in the air. It could be dos Anjos. It could be whoever. But the thing is, Conor's looking to fight March 5th, and realistically, everybody wants to see Conor. So the opponent is not really important. But so I'm sure he'll be fighting March 5th. So just stay tuned.
And that is consistent with what he has said in the past. The opponent is just a blank face. But for you guys, have you guys begun actually training for March 5th?
Yeah, we're getting into camp now, and realistically, we don't really get out of camp. We train consistently. A couple of changes when it comes to opponent, but nothing too much changes. So we're always in camp.
Okay, so now I want to talk about your connection to all of this, because like I said, you're always in his corner. You're his striking coach when he's doing open workouts and everything. All along this ride, you're front and center. But as longtime fans of yours and Irish MMA would know, you fell just short of realizing your dream of fighting in the UFC. Just short. You hung up your gloves a couple of years ago. Being a part of this ride, does that give you, do you take some solace in that? Like, okay, you didn't make it, you didn't get to step foot in the octagon as a fighter, but you're there every step of the way with not only Conor, but some of the other SBG fighters as well? Or was it something you had to get over mentally? Like, we're all human beings. You want to realize your own dreams. How do you deal with those emotions?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was pretty tough. For I started MMA maybe 15 years ago. I was 17. I'm 32 now, so 14 years ago. And my goal was to get to the UFC. There was no Irish fighters in the UFC. Nobody really knew about it. And I got in the early days when John was still training, and there's maybe 5 or 6 guys in the country that even knew what MMA was. So I got in back then, and my goal was to get to the UFC. And slowly but surely, Ireland started to come on the UFC's radar, and for me at that time, I was, pretty much at the forefront. But I just think I was a little bit before my time. I hung up the gloves after a loss against Wilson Hayes. It wasn't down to the loss; it was just the fact that I was doing so much. I was working out of John's gym. I ran my own gym. I was working out of a college. I was pretty much spread too thin. So I called it a day and just focused on the coaching. you know, through all that time as well, I was working with Conor, and I was one of his main training partners for a very long time, one of his main sparring partners. He was one of my main sparring partners. And then, you know, both of us being southpaws, we used to pad each other an awful lot. And, you know, as I slowed down, I kind of took up the role as being his pad man, and just really kind of helping him out with that. And that's what people kind of know me for today. But yeah, I fought for a very long time. I had a decent enough career, had some good fights, some good wins, a few losses. But yeah, it was a great career. I really enjoyed it. But it's a little bit better, you know, just hanging up the gloves before the Irish invasion came along. But I think people know and respect me for what I did in Ireland in the sport, and I'm happy with that.
Well, you know, there always has to be a pioneer, and I think many people would put you in that category, so you can take a lot of pride in that. But your last fight was in 2012, the aforementioned Wilson Hayes fight. Prior to that, you had won, I believe, 7 or 8 in a row, and you had this huge fight against Shannon Gugarty in July of 2012, which almost felt like, okay, this might be the fight that gets you into the UFC. You were fighting a former UFC fighter. You win that fight. From all accounts, I've watched it afterwards, but it was pandemonium in the arena because you had a great comeback and all that. Did you think in your mind that was it, that you were finally going to get your chance after that one?
You know, I don't know. We still kind of went on the radar at that stage. You know, it really took Conor. It took Conor and Conor's confidence and his ability to get the UFC to take notice. I felt I was getting there slowly but surely. I thought maybe I needed 1 or 2 more fights. I thought maybe after the Wilson fight, if I'd have won that, I probably would have got the call, because I think Conor was after getting signed at that stage as well. And yeah, I thought it was up next, but I didn't get the win, and I kind of called it a day after that. I was going to call it a day after the Wilson fight pretty much anyway, but yeah, so that was it.
So now with the rise and MMA in Ireland being so popular, have you been ever approached by any promoter, anyone to say, come on out? I mean, you can make some more money now. It's a lot more popular. You can fight on a bigger platform as far as TV. Have you ever been tempted to come out of retirement?
You know, I have been approached. I've definitely been approached by a couple of organisations, and then, you know, when I was fighting, the money was terrible. You know, and that was one of the reasons why as well. You call it a day. You're training 2 or 3 times a day for 6 weeks, and you're getting pennies for it. But yeah, I have been approached, but I won't come out of retirement. Although after every fight I watch, every weekend I watch a UFC, I get the butterflies. I get excited. I'm like, you could do it now, and you could come back and hang with these guys. Yeah, no, I wouldn't come back. I've too much now. You know, I've 2 gyms running, and it's just too hard for me to do it. And you know, when you hang up the gloves, I think it's important that you stick by it. A lot of fighters, they hang up, they come back, they hang up, and they fight late into their career. They do damage to themselves. You know, I think it was the right time for me to call it a day, and I won't go back. I'm happy with what I'm doing. Like, I mean, I'm getting to see the world. I'm getting to experience, you know, stuff that nobody gets to experience. You know, to be part of a world title, you know, a champion, a UFC world champion, to help him to get to where he is now. That's good enough for me.
I was talking to John Kavanagh recently, and he said this was his quote about you. He said, "quote If I had a choice between me or him as my coach, I'd pick him. I genuinely mean that." And that's incredibly high praise from someone like him. When did you realize that you can become a great coach after fighting?
I mean, I coached for most of my career. When I met John, maybe, as I said, 14 years ago, I first off, I couldn't pay for my fees, so I cleaned the mats, and I cleaned the mats for about a year. And then he asked me, he said, "Do you want to teach the kids program for me on?" And, you know, it'll be good for you. It'll be good for you, you know, when you're coaching, you have to understand divisions and techniques a little bit better. And I started teaching the kids program, and I kind of fell in love with teaching. You know, you get a great buzz out of teaching somebody something, and then a week later you see them work that technique on an opponent, on a live opponent, you get a great buzz out of it. So I kind of started to enjoy that, and I've always been coaching, I've always been teaching classes, and maybe I'm a patient person as well. I have a lot of time for people, so maybe that kind of helps.
Do you recall the first time you met Conor McGregor, and if so, what were your thoughts?
yeah, I do remember. I met Conor McGregor and Tom Egan at the same time. Tom Egan obviously fought in UFC 93, but I met the two of the guys in a small gym, in one of John's first gyms in House Cross, and the two of them, they were very new. Conor knew nothing. He was a good striker, and Tom had a bit of kickboxing, done a little bit of jiu-jitsu, but not much, the two of them. And, I was getting ready for a fight and stuff, and he couldn't believe that I actually fought. They were like, you actually compete, you actually get into a cage or into a ring, because there's no cages back then, and you fight, and they were kind of shocked. So we were moving around, and I was moving around with Tom, and then I was moving around with Conor, and I remember kind of moving around lightly, and Conor kind of hit me, and I was like, shit, Jesus, this kid hits hard, man. So I took him down, and I submit him, like that was it. But I remember him just getting up off the ground and just not being phased at all, but you could almost see in his eyes that he was like, I could have knocked you out easily. That shot that landed would have knocked you out if I wanted it. And that was from day one, like kind of having that 100% belief in himself. And that was the one thing that stuck with me, all Conor's career. I remember seeing that in him from day one. The first session, no jiu-jitsu, no wrestling, but still, I would have knocked you out. I would have beat you, like. And he always kind of had that, and it just kind of stuck with me. Like, even to this day, I often think back, and I'm like, Jesus, man. He had that in him from day one, which is, not many people have that.
Do you recall what the turning point for him was? Because, now the confidence that he possesses, and more so than that, just the skill that he has been putting on display, and how he's finishing these great fighters, legends like Jose Aldo, that wasn't always apparent. We forget that the guy does have 2 losses on his record, albeit those losses were many moons ago. But do you recall when the turning point came for him, in your opinion? You thought that this guy actually has the potential to not only be a great European fighter, a great Irish fighter, but to be one of the great UFC fighters as well.
Yeah, well, I did remember a very long time ago as well, before any of his losses, I remember saying to people, like, this kid, I remember saying to Conor, I says, you could easily go to the UFC, Conor. There's nobody that has your striking ability, your ability to be able to get yourself in positions and land shots so clean. Nobody has that. And from kind of very early on, I would say that to him, just work on your wrestling, work on your jiu-jitsu and stuff. I remember saying it to his dad before his first loss. I was like, now Conor's going to the UFC, and then he lost, and I was devastated. I'd done his corner for that fight, and he got caught in a knee bar, tapped out, but he was still very inexperienced. And he took a bit of time off after his first loss. He was still very young. Came back after about maybe 6 months, started training again, put a good run together, and he fought Joe Duffy. We all know what happened. Joe Duffy submitted him in the first. But I'll never forget, Conor was back in the gym that Monday training. And he was like, so look, I made a mistake. I'll fix the mistake and I'll move on. And for me, that was the point where I was like, he's got it now. He's not going to worry about losses or anything like that. He's going to fix the mistakes. He's just going to keep improving. And after that, he was a bit more mature as well. So I just think he was able to take things in a stride. But after that fight, he just became a totally different animal. He really focused on his jiu-jitsu. He put the gi on. He trained jiu-jitsu day in, day out. He trained a lot more wrestling. He just lived in the gym. From that point on, that's where Conor McGregor we know now. That's where he came from,
One of the aspects of his game that I appreciate the most is that he doesn't waste punches. He's like a sniper out there, and when he hits you, in particular with his left, it's lights out. I'm going to give you the credit for all of that since you're his striking coach. This left hand.
He was a good. Sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
He was a good striker when he came into the gym, but it wasn't. He's just very, very good at reading people's bodies. That's what I find. Even when I moved around with Conor myself and I used to spar him, he knew exactly what shots were coming. He could put you in a position where he knew that you were going to throw a left straight, and he would have to counter to it. And he's very good at that. Even over the years now, he's just refined that, and he can seem to do it a lot quicker. We'll get guys coming into the gym. Conor would have never sparred them, and within 30, 40 seconds, he can work out what shots they're likely to throw, make them throw them, he'll slip them, and he'll put the shots in to finish them. And he's got great timing on it, But yeah, we've done pads, we've moved around for many years, so yeah, I've helped him, but it's the way he reads the game is what I think is special,
Well, another thing, we were talking about your emotions, but I can't imagine how surreal it must be. And I've talked about this with Coach Kavanaugh as well. But for you guys who are fighting in these, as you put it, these GAA halls, and on a very, smaller scale, here in America, we weren't talking about, Cage Warriors and stuff in the early days. Now it's getting a lot more of attention because who they've produced. But would you ever have a moment where you stop, you smell the roses, you say there are 10,000 people at this weigh-in, in large part to see, my guy. There are $10 million in gate revenue that has just been produced. We're fighting at the MGM. Do you ever sit back and say, like, holy cow, I can't believe it's all come to this. It's gone from these small GA halls to this. Do you ever have those moments when you're at the fights, or is it only after the fact, or you haven't even been able to do that yet?
Yeah, no, we do. I do definitely. When, as I said, I fought in front of, 200 and 300 people that paid nothing for it. And realistically, I never actually seen. I always thought maybe I'd get 1 or 2 fights in the UFC, I'd make a few bob, and I'd buy a house, and that was my goal. But I will say, Conor always believed that he was going to be the best in the world. I remember sparring. I remember when Jose Aldo was, at his prime. He was smashing everybody. He smashed everybody in the WEC. Went to the UFC, and smashing everybody. And I remember talking to Conor, like, Jesus, yeah, Aldo's fucking solid, isn't he? And Conor's like, nah, I can see holes in his game. He says, like, he knew he was going to be the UFC he knew he was going to be the champion at some stage. And slowly but surely, as he won the Cage Warriors belts, that was a big thing for us at that time. Then he won 2 belts. Then he got signed. We're like, oh, he's doing good. Then he had a fantastic win, and then he had Poirier. And slowly but surely, you kind of start to believe yourself. But still, when you're sitting, you're walking out with him, and there's 10,000 Irish fans or 16,000 Irish fans screaming. It is very surreal, and you just embrace it and you enjoy it. I'd be smiling ear to ear. I love it. I think it's fantastic. And the same with Conor, he loves it. You watch him coming out to the Aldo fight, and he's smiling, he's looking around, and he's getting a great buzz out of it. And we do as well. It's unbelievable, but it's amazing, and I'm very grateful to be part of it and to have experienced it.
Has life changed more for you as his coach, and because of all the success that you guys have had as of late, more so than all your big wins combined?
Yeah. My career as an MMA fighter, like my career as Conor McGregor's padman and striking coach, far surpasses my career as an MMA fighter. But I think my career as an MMA fighter has given me a lot of respect as well. So, but I couldn't have wished to be cornering a fighter, fighting for a UFC title, and then for him to win it in that fashion, And this still is only the beginning for Conor. He's gonna surprise people again and again. I really believe that. No matter who gets the fight against him on March, you're gonna see an improved Conor McGregor. You're gonna see something spectacular again. People just need to tune in, and people need to get on the bandwagon and start believing it, because he does special things.
And if everything goes to plan, we'll see him fight RDA on March 5th, and he can make history then, because no one has ever held 2 UFC titles at the same time. How do you feel about this? He just got the featherweight title. If this actually comes to fruition, how do you feel about him jumping up to 155 and fighting a guy who, and I know you can appreciate his striking because he's done great things, and especially has really come together under the tutelage of Rafael Cordero. How do you feel about this move for him at this point in his career?
I think potentially it's a great matchup for Conor. I think there's no doubt in how good Dos Anjos is, but for us, for me and Conor and for John, we see holes in Dos Anjos' game as well, and when it comes to striking, you don't want to make even the slightest mistake when you're fighting Conor, because the slightest mistake, you'll be waking up, looking up at the ceiling. And that's what happens, So, potentially it could be a great matchup, but I still believe that if anybody's in there, the fight starts standing, okay? And if you're in there standing with Conor McGregor, you're in a lot of danger, no matter who you are.
And do you like this idea of him going from 155 to 145 and back up, to continue to fluctuate between both weight classes?
Yeah, well, I think 155 is a better option now because of what he's done at 145. But there's always the Frankie Edgar fight that people are going to want to see. So maybe if he goes back, fight Frankie, then he can leave that division. Okay. But we'll see. As I said, Conor's happy to fight anyway. At 145, 155. But I think there's a lot more matches at 155 now. So yeah, we'll cross that path when it comes.
It's an amazing thing because if he gets by Frankie, you can make the case, at least for right now, that he has cleaned out that division, wins over Poirier and Max Holloway and Dennis Seaver and Chad Mendes and Jose Aldo, and then Frankie. And after just one title defense, that's unbelievable. And then he goes up to 155. So he continues to impress. You impress, my friend. I wish you the very best throughout your career now as a coach and a gym owner, and congratulations on your success, not only as a coach, but as a fighter as well, because as I said, you may not have gone to the UFC, but from what I gather and from what everyone says and how passionately they speak of you, if it wasn't for people like you, and there's a very, small and select group of you, if it wasn't for people like you, there would be no Conor McGregor and Paddy Holohan and Cathal Pendry, the guys who are in the UFC, Ashling Daly, of course, as well. So congratulations on all of that. Happy for your success. And again, thank you very much for coming on the show. And we hope to speak to you very soon as well.
Well, I really appreciate it, Ariel. Thanks for having me on. And I look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you.
All right, there he is. Owen Roddy, the striking coach for one. Conor McGregor, also head man over at Primal MMA, coach over at SBG Ireland, and the man who has been by Conor's side along with John Kavanagh and Artem Lobov and Tom Egan for quite some time as well. You see him in his corner every time, sort of the, much like John as well, the yin to Conor's yang, not as boisterous and brash and outspoken, but I think for many reasons, that being one of them, why they work so well together. So congratulations to him on his success. Looking forward to March 5th. As you heard there, he said, look, can't speak too much about the opponent. We'll be there March 5th. So I think if you're an Irish fan, you'll be happy to hear that. Also reached out to Conor's team in the midst of all of this during this show, and they said that the report that came out from Kombacha, at least from their end, they don't subscribe to that. They're not the ones holding up any kind of announcement or deal.